Hi everyone, welcome to Chai and Biscuits. In today's episode, we are going to talk about the only important equipment that we need in football, the ball itself. In particular, we look at the footballs used in World Cup and how different properties of the ball affect the flight of the ball. I'm sure many of you remember the most controversial ball in the World Cup history, the Jabalani. We delve into why it was controversial and the corrections that Adidas made. What we found interesting looking at the current World Cup ball is how the ball evolved over the years. From the old school black and white ball with hexagonal and pentagonal designs to the current ball, Al Rila. I don't know if you guys noticed it, the ball has to be charged before every game because of the sensors that are present in the ball.
Yeah, I mean, the craziest goals that we have seen from the past. I mean, when I was a child, I probably remember, going to YouTube and watching Roberto Carlos's freakishly curved free kick goal, against France. I think it was in '97. Uh,
Hmm.
do you
Yeah,
remember
yeah,
that?
that bent so much that I remember looking at the ball boy behind the goal and how much he tried to escape the ball, but the ball just curved into the goal.
Yeah, it didn't even hit him. In the goalkeeper
Yeah,
Barthez, he thought it's gonna go out, but he didn't even move
yeah,
because it was going out.
yeah. Or Ronaldo's knuckleball goal against Portsmouth, I think in 2006-7 season, that moved like crazy unexpectedly in the air before going into the net.
Good old Manchester United days for Ronaldo. uh, so, what made the ball move so crazily? What's the physics behind it? That's what we are going to look here in today's episode. Also, we want to mention that this episode is special because this topic is a full-time job for our friend Rohit, as he is doing a PhD in this field.
Yep, yep. So Rohit, what exactly is your research? Just for the listeners here, just a small, tidbit. What's going on?
So, my PhD is in football aerodynamics in simple terms. So, I look at what actually um influences the ball flight and how to make it better, or how to basically evaluate the flight of a ball.
Got it. Okay. So, going from there, where exactly do we, start on this, Rohit, on this World Cup balls? Because you're the expert here. So,
So, I think when we come to World Cup balls, where we have to start with is 2006, because from 2006 Adidas started making these fewer panel balls like you mentioned. The old school balls were the 32 panel ball, which had the black and white design on it, and that's what we remember. And you remember the stitches on the ball. You remember how if the ball gets wet, it's going to hurt you like hell. And
yeah, the stitches would
yeah,
come out as well whenever you sometimes, when you're playing hard
exactly,
for
as
a long
the
time.
ball gets older
Older,
and older.
exactly. Yep, yep.
Mhm.
So from 2002, they moved when Adidas was making the balls. They decided to make the balls sort of machine stitched. So these stitches, until 2002, were done by people, like hand stitched, and it was done in these countries like Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, where labor was cheap. And what they wanted to do was increase the rate of production. So they wanted to machine make all of these balls.
Yeah, that's interesting actually. Did you say 2006 where it's where when they started doing the machine made?
Yes, 2006. So that would be the Team Geist ball in Germany.
Oh.
Okay, so the Teamgeist ball itself was not controversial, right? But what exactly changed from that 2006 World Cup to 2010 World Cup, Jabalani? Why was it so controversial?
So so I'll just explain a bit more about Team Geist. So what they did was the 32 panel ball, the old ball, they made it fewer panels, and they started making it thermally bonded. So instead of stitching the balls, they sort of put the balls together using heat and glue. And they did
Mhm.
this with the machines, so it would be done faster. And the problem with that was from 2006 to 2010, they made fewer panels. And one of the things they told to sell the Jabulani itself was that it was the roundest ball ever made.
Hmm.
So to make up for it, they sort of added grips and grooves on the ball. You know, I don't know if you remember. So, but making it the roundest ball in history is was never going to be something good, and that was seen right from the beginning of the World Cup when all of these goalkeepers were um, complaining about the flight of the ball.
Yeah, I remember Robin's back pass, I think, to Casillas, and the ball almost bounced back and went into Spain's goal. So yeah, it had weird flight activity going on with that Jabulani.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think the craziest comment was from Julio Cesar. He compared it to a supermarket football. even
Exactly.
even Messi complained that it was complicated for forwards. Same like goalkeepers. There were a lot of issues with the ball. Mm.
Yeah.
So you think it's majorly because uh, they converted it from 16 panel to 8 panels. That is the one of the biggest reasons, and that made it so round. Mm.
Yes. So that's one of the reasons. So I think before we get into why Jabulani itself was different, we have to look at what basically affects the flight of a ball.
Mm, yep.
So when you look at a ball, what are the things that you notice on the surface itself? It's basically the stitches. If you look at the older balls, but if you look at a ball now, it's the seams. So the seams are basically false stitches. So basically, these are just grooves on the ball that you will notice, just sort of like a depth in the ball, and these seams have length throughout the ball, so that will affect the flight of the ball, and seam the depth of these seams will affect the flight of the ball, and how much width. So each ball has different characteristics of this seam uh, parameters, other things that affect the flight of the ball are, I don't know if you've noticed, in the recent balls they have pimples. So basically just some roughness on the ball throughout the ball.
Mhm.
So when you say pimples, it's like how when you probably hold a golf ball or something, you'll have something on the surface of it, right?
Yeah, so that would be the dimples, right? So that would
Oh,
be the ball will have some sort of depth going into the ball. So actually, the current World Cup ball has dimples, but until the previous World Cup, the Telstar from 2018, so basically 2014 and 2018 had pimples on the ball. So instead of going in, they had projections on the ball.
got it. So these
Got
are all something that kind of affects the flight of the ball.
Exactly. So, so coming out of football, if you look at a golf ball, like you mentioned, those dimples affect the flight of the ball, and the fuzz on a tennis ball affect the flight of the tennis ball.
Okay. So we've spoken about the seam depth, seam width, pimples, dimples. So we want to understand more. Like how do these parameters actually affect? Like what is the science behind it?
Yeah, so I obviously don't want to get too technical since we are on a podcast, and
Mm-hmm.
it would be better if I we could show pictures and so on. So I'll just try to keep it as simple as possible. So when a football moves through the air, it encounters resistance. You would have already heard of it, drag. So any object that moves through the air, you hear aerodynamic drag, which basically reduces the ball's speed. So it's sort of like an opposite force acting on the ball, and opposite to the direction of the motion. So what affects the amount of drag is the parameters on the ball itself. So basically, the size of the ball, the weight of the ball, diameter, the surface of the ball, and also the the fluid that it is traveling through. So if you're looking at air, uh, what how much the air affects the ball. If you're looking at water, how much the water affects the ball. But since all of these are equal when you're looking at footballs, and the diameter is equal. Um, the air
Weight of the
obviously
ball
is,
is, yeah.
yeah. So all of these are
Mm.
standardized. So the only thing that is not standardized when you're looking at the drag is the surface roughness. So basically these things that we've just talked about, the parameters. So the seam depth, the seam width. So all of these things play a huge role in uh, how the ball moves in the air.
So you mentioned that all these surface roughness kind of play a very big role in the flight of the ball. So basically, we're saying that there is a percentage of effect that these surface roughness have on the impact of the goals. Like the Roberto Carlos goal or Ronaldo's knuckleball. If you picture it, if the ball didn't have any surface roughness or these parameters, I don't think those events would have happened. Am I right to say that?
Yeah, 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 exactly. So every ball has to have some sort of roughness to make sure that it travels in a particular way that you want it to.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, speed is a uh, huge part of that. So when any object moves through the air, it has something called the critical transition speed. So at this transition speed, something happens called the drag crisis. So at this speed, um, uh, below this speed, the flow of air around the ball is smooth. So basically, the ball has a sort of like a blanket covering the ball, and this
Mm-hmm.
blanket is very smooth. And this is also called a laminar flow. And above this speed, it's very chaotic. And this is also called turbulent flow. So for a 32 panel football, the speed at which this drag crisis happens is at a low speed. So when you move from the low speed to the high speed, this drag crisis happens. And when this drag crisis happens, it can be very chaotic. The ball can be very chaotic. Okay. So, but for a 32 panel ball, the old school ball, this happens at a very low speed.
So you mean to say that for the 32 panel ball, at low speed, the time to move into the turbulent mode would be faster or
So
slower?
it happens, yeah, it happens at a lower speed. So basically, it happens much earlier. So it
Mm.
doesn't really affect the ball so much. But what happened with the Jabulani was this drag crisis happens at a particular speed, which is coincidentally the same speed at which you take a shot, or you take a free kick, or you take a cross, or a corner. So what happens is for a 32 panel ball, it happens at lower speeds, and so usually these lower speeds are from a player that is close by to another player, you know. But when you're taking a shot, it, there is more time for that ball to move in the air, so it moves very unexpectedly because this drag crisis happens, and the air around the ball is very turbulent.
Understood.
Oh, okay. Yeah, got it. So, but just to avoid confusion, so we are talking about Jabulani, and we also spoke about Roberto Carlos free kick and Ronaldo's knuckleball shot, right? Which was not Jabulani.
Yes.
So, but the change happened in the way we manufacture balls in 2006, and after that, the Ronaldo's knuckleball happened, right? Uh,
Yeah.
so so, so what is the difference between Ronaldo's free kick ball and the Jabulani? Just the difference there.
So, what is happening with Ronaldo's particularly is uh, so Ronaldo takes a shot which is called knuckleball shot, and with the knuckleball shot, you go from stationary to turbulent very quickly. So there is no curve. So there is no actually um, no gradual Magnus effect, which is basically just the opposite force, the drag that I was talking about. So it doesn't happen gradually. So it reaches this turbulent flow that we've just talked about very quickly. So when
Hmm.
it reaches this turbulent flow, it moves in the air. So this is in particular for a knuckleball shot. But the problem with Jabulani was that it was happening for all sorts of balls. So even without the knuckleball, so even if you take a normal free kick that Messi would take, or
Mhm.
Beckham would take, so it was happening for these kind of free kicks for a normal shot.
Got it. Yep. Yep. So, what did FIFA or Adidas do it to correct this issue? Correct move from Jabulani to Brazuca, I guess, right in 2014. What did they do? How is the ball different now?
So, like I said, Jabulani was very smooth. So, what Adidas realized they have to do, they actually realized it much earlier. So, even for Jabulani, you see that they added grooves to it. But what they didn't realize was how round it was. So, what they did from after 2010 is they added more grooves. So, basically, the seam length is much longer when you compare Jabulani and the Brazuca of 2014. So the
Mm.
seam depth is deeper and the seam length is much longer on the Brazuca. And obviously they didn't want to take any chance. So what they also did was added the pimples on the ball, like I mentioned earlier. So it is definitely the much more rougher. The surface of the ball itself is much more rougher than Jabulani. And what Jabulani also can be compared to is a beach ball that you play with in the beach. So it will move crazily in the air because of how smooth it is. So
Mm.
Jabulani is closer to that beach ball as compared to any other football.
Okay, got it.
Understood. So we talked about Jabulani in specific for this time, right? But what did Adidas do with the recent ball design? I know we have Al Rihla in for Qatar, we have Telstar 18, like you mentioned, for Russia, and the Brazuca in the 2014 World Cup that happened in South America. So, do you, for the listeners here, do you know what are the differences that have happened over the past years for all the World Cup balls?
So I personally think that they will not do major changes because they don't want to have that risk of Jabulani again. There was so much controversy, so they're trying to keep it as normal as possible. So the difference between Brazuca and Telstar 18 from 2018 and Al Rihla from now is there's actually not much difference. So these balls actually are very similar in terms of properties, but because it's a new ball, you will want to see that it is actually different. So it is very slightly different, different enough that you will think that it's a different ball, but they won't make it so different that uh, it's as similar to Jabulani. So Al Rihla itself is much more rough. So it is actually closer to much more rougher than Telstar 18 or Brazuca, but very similar. So basically, as I already mentioned, at lower speeds, it will be it will have the drag crisis at a lower speed.
Mm. But I also heard that the current ball Al Rihla that we are using in Qatar World Cup right now is it's a bit faster than the other.
Yeah, yeah. Adidas actually advertises it as the fastest in flight till now.
So
So,
that's exactly what I meant. So when I
yep.
say the drag crisis happens earlier, so they mean that it is going to move from laminar to turbulent very quickly. But the fact that it is much more rough. So when you look at Jabulani, it happened very late
Smooth,
on.
yeah.
It was smooth also, so it
Right.
acted like a beach ball. But when you look at the Al Rihla, it's it happens much earlier as compared to Jabulani, and it's rough. So each roughness on the ball is going to trigger that turbulent layer and make it smoother in the air, much more predictable in the air.
So
Understood.
that is why Ronaldo is not able to hit free kicks.
I actually think that's one of the reasons that knuckleballs are not so common anymore. So because the ball itself is rough, completely rough. So if you look at
Mm-hmm.
the knuckleball goals of between 2002 and 2010, or maybe even 2014, they were quite a few. But right now, you don't really notice it anymore
I think,
because
yeah.
yeah, because the ball is rougher. So you to get that knuckleball effect, you have to hit it at a very high speed, and you don't really know where the ball is going to go.
Yeah, I think that's why I agreed. I think that's why Gareth Bale moved to golf. Maybe he'll get a different kind of roughness on the golf ball to use the knuckleball technique.
Yeah,
Yeah,
actually,
and
golf is very aerodynamically good because of the roughness on the golf itself.
yeah, and I don't know if you guys observed. So Marcus Rashford hit a free kick in this World Cup, right? And I saw it. At least, like, I'm a Manchester United fan, so you always observe Rashford hitting free kicks, and he always tried to follow Ronaldo hitting knuckleball shot free kicks. But in this World Cup, the one he scored with his side foot. So
Exactly.
this is this is the first time I saw him hitting a free kick with his side foot, and it went into, so which is different. Maybe he already grasped the science behind it.
Yeah, I think yeah, all of these kind of explain why these balls have been different and how they move, and it kind of explains, the flight of the ball that we have been seeing for so many World Cups. So I would like to tie all of this to your research, Rohit. Can you tell a little bit in detail of what your exactly is your research, and how your research will help in future designs, if it could be for the World Cup balls or.
So, like I said, I'm studying the aerodynamics of the football and basically what affects the flight of the ball. So, we've already talked about these seam parameters, right? Seam depth, seam length, seam width. So, what I want to do is basically arrive at a single or a few parameters that can basically compare balls. So, right now, these parameters that compare balls are too many, and I would like to arrive at a parameter that would be uh, much more simpler to standardize, so that you can compare the aerodynamics of the ball much more easily. That's what I'm working on.
So basically, it will be called Rohit's constant or Rohit's something, which people will be using it in their, um,
In future to
physics.
design.
Yeah, future to
So
Yes.
design.
if I do get to name something, I would probably name it chai and biscuits constant.
Nice.
Nice. That's the spirit. Yep.
Maybe this is where footballers refer on how to hit free kicks. We can tell them.
No, actually, it's amazing that like people do experiments on these, right? But footballers do it so intuitively. Like, obviously, Abhishek plays amazing football. So when the free kicks that you scored them so intuitively. You did it without knowing the physics of it, right?
I think definitely. I just winged it at that time, and hopefully it went in. So I was really happy.
Mhm. So maybe, like, for the listeners, right, Rohit, like, can we know? So, there is a lot of, if you when you see a free kick being taken, there is a lot of uh, thought around how the ball is positioned on the ground.
Hmm.
I think they look at the valve, and they place it like based on the valve position. So, how, based on your research, where do we think, like, we have to place the valve in relation to goal, and how, when you're taking a free kick?
So, like I said, there are many things that influence the flight of a ball. So even the orientation of how you place the ball affects the flight. So that's the reason the valve is used as some sort of a reference to place the ball.
Mhm.
So they place, so whichever one they practice, they would be able to look exactly at any ball and look at the valve and know that, okay, if I place the valve here, I know that it's going to go this way. So actually it depends on person to person. It doesn't really, there is no correct way to score a goal, basically.
Mm.
That's a typical PhD student answer. Uh, you don't have an answer. You just say, like, anything can happen.
I think we have
I
seen
agree.
that with examples all over the World Cup with Roberto Carlos, with Ronaldo's goal against Spain against De Gea, and then Messi's free kick against Allison versus Liverpool.
Oh
So
yeah.
we've seen so many examples of ball flight, just taking
Mhm.
abrupt movements, and there are so many other examples in YouTube that I can't think of right now. Kind of explains why the ball move the way they move. So yeah,
So, a trivia question for you guys: which year was the first official World Cup ball? Like, when did it happen? Do you guys know?
Oh. Hmm. So was it maybe in the 80s?
Close?
1966.
Nope. Mm,
Let me guess. 86.
nope.
Hmm.
It is in 1970. That is when it started. Until then, there was no official World Cup ball. 1970 was the first time. Telstar was the first official World Cup ball, and it had the black and white stripes on it. And the reason why it had was it's easy to see on the black and white screen, it seems. So that
Aha.
is that is one of the reason. And remarkably, like, Adidas only provided 20 balls in that for that tournament. So it was not used for all the games. They chose which games to use. So that's when
Wow.
it started. Mm.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
2018 ball was sort of like a reference to the first Adidas ball that was used.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, like you said, Adidas provided that ball. So Adidas must have been the only sponsor of the ball ever since.
Yes, yes. So maybe to conclude, like, what what can we expect from the design for the future World Cup balls? Like, what changes can we expect in ball design?
So I think, like we've already seen, they don't want to experiment too much with the ball itself. So right now, like you mentioned, charging the ball before the game, right? So
Mhm.
that is because there are sensors inside the ball to look at the position of the ball and the force that the ball is hit with. So basically, for
Wow.
VAR, yeah. So for VAR and also to measure. I don't know if you guys saw the Bruno Ronaldo goal. Adidas was able to tell exactly that there was no force applied on the ball when it passed Ronaldo's hair because of the sensors in the ball. So there will be a lot of, I think, innovations like in terms of technology, but I don't think in terms of design itself there will be a lot of difference. It will be pretty much the same. They will make enough changes that it'll be slightly different, but they won't make a lot of change.
Right. So thank you so much, Rohit, for bringing your expertise into this. We really enjoyed learning a bit about uh, the ball and the physics. So here's to hoping, I guess, we don't have a crazy ball like Jabulani again. And few of you who are
Really
listening
hope
on
so.
this, thank you for listening to us. I hope you enjoyed and were able to understand the physics behind designing the football and the flight of the football as well. So let us know in comments if you would like to have a video on this on YouTube. We'd be happy to do that as well. Um, so yeah, until next time.
See you
See you.
guys.